A woman is found dead by her caretaker one afternoon. She is sitting in her favorite chair in her living room, empty bottles of medication around her, a white powdery substance all over her chest. Police arrive and immediately think she committed suicide or took an accidental overdose of her medication. Within a few months, two of the woman's closest friends come forward and say, "Wait a minute, not so fast." And police decide to take a closer look as a killer scrambles to cover their tracks. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. It's close to 5 p.m. on October 18th, 2018, when Pewaukee, Wisconsin police take a call about an unconscious woman who is reportedly unresponsive and not breathing. Fire department personnel and EMTs head out to the Meadow Grass Circle condominium complex, which is in a rural section of Pewaukee, with a plush golf course bordering the condos on one side and an apartment building on the other. The call is from a 39-year-old woman who has been taking care of 62-year-old Lynn Hernan, the woman in trouble. The caller identifies herself as Jessy Kurczewski, Lynn's caretaker and lifelong friend. When the first deputy arrives, Lynn Hernan is sitting in a reclining chair inside the living room of her home. It appears as if she is asleep. There's what the deputy later says is a large amount of crushed white-colored powder on Lynn's chest, and a plate to her left with the same. Nearby, close enough for Lynn to reach, are several empty prescription bottles on a table. After a quick check, Lynn Hernan is pronounced dead. The deputy notes that the situation seems to be an accidental drug overdose or possibly a suicide. Lynn's caretaker, Jessy Kurczewski, is then asked to step aside and give a preliminary statement. Jessy is obviously upset. She says she looked up to Lynn as almost a mother. She can't believe what's happening. Jessy explains that Lynn has been in the hospital over the past several weeks. She spent 14 days, actually, the last time she was admitted. She'd been home now for 4 days, but has not been well. Lynn had also recently fallen, and Jessy had to call the neighbor to help pick Lynn up off the floor. It appeared to Jessy, who says she saw Lynn every day, that doctors could not find much wrong with her, and that perhaps her medical issues were all inside her head. The deputy speaks to several neighbors, all of whom indicate they had spoken to Lynn over the past 24 hours. The deputy wonders if there had been any indication at all that she might have been suicidal. They say no. Lynn might have been ill, but she loved life. She loved people. She loved her animals. There was never any sign whatsoever that she was depressed to the point of taking her own life. Jessy Kurczewski then explains that she has keys to Lynn's house, has known Lynn all her life, and had been her caretaker for about the past 6 months as Lynn's need for daily care increased over that time. Lynn, she adds, has no immediate family. Jessy's mother and Lynn had known each other 30 or more years. They asked Jessy, what does she mean by caretaker? I check in on her 2 or 3 times a day, she says. She also drives Lynn to all her appointments, cooks for her, does her laundry, cleans, that sort of thing. Jessy makes it clear she is not a registered nurse or home health care aide. She is simply a family friend taking care of someone she loves and someone she called Auntie Lynn. As she continues talking, Jessy mentions how Lynn had been acting kind of erratic the past few days. When she got out of the hospital, she made a point to say she wasn't going back. She was all done with doctors and nurses. They had wanted her to enter rehab, apparently. Lynn told Jessy, they are not getting my money, and threw all the bills she had been sent from the hospital into the garbage. There was no way, Jessy tells the deputy, that Lynn would ever go into a nursing home either. She was afraid of that, which was why Lynn had employed Jessy to care for her. Lynn had always been skinny. She took care of herself. She had long, curly blonde hair and the disposition of a friendly, happy-go-lucky person, grateful for everything she had. Lynn had turned 62 that past June. Friends describe her as someone who lived more life in her first 40 years than most people do in a lifetime. Lynn had a way of making her friends feel like they were family. Originally from Madison, Wisconsin, she had moved to Pewaukee during the 80s to pursue her passion as a salon owner, a hairstylist. She loved the sun, the water, entertaining friends, and cooking. But more than any of that, she was absolutely wild for Bette Davis, black and white movies, and The Wizard of Oz. Aren't we all? Lynn embodied the essence of happiness and kindness. There was not one person who knew her that had anything bad to say about Lynn. She would have given you her last dollar if you asked. 35-year-old Jessy Kurczewski insisted that, despite what friends and neighbors said, Lynn was suicidal. Jessy had been the closest to Lynn these past several months, and she had cut off contact with anyone other than Jessy and Jessy's mother. Jessy goes on to tell the deputy, Lynn was in a bad way of late, acting strangely, drinking, falling down, bitter, and hostile. Her health was in a steady state of decline, and doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. She was growing more tired of life as each day passed. The other thing Jessy notes is that she had become Lynn's power of attorney, simply because Lynn was scared she'd die and not have all of her wishes taken care of. As protocol, the first officers on scene call in an investigator, just to be certain things are what they appear to be. After Lynn's body is taken away and people in Lynn's life begin to try and understand what happened, none of it makes much sense to those she is closest to. One of Lynn's best friends, Corinne Poza, a woman Lynn had known for the past 30-plus years, is especially surprised by what she is hearing. In fact, none of it sounds like Lynn. Back in the early 80s, Corinne met Lynn at a local bar, hit it off, and had been friends ever since. Corinne's kids, in fact, had grown up with Lynn and viewed her as part of the Poza family. After they met, Corinne and Lynn became inseparable. Lynn took a real liking to Corinne's kids. She often made food and brought it over to the house. When the holidays came, Lynn was there as an extended family member and always had gifts for everyone, especially the kids. Most everyone called Lynn the queen of the bargain. She could find that needle in a haystack deal anywhere. She would frequent thrift stores, antique shops, tag sales, take things that were maybe old and worn and turn them into valuable gifts. She'd find out what foods Corinne and the kids loved and bake them. She was frugal. She didn't have a lot of money most of her life, so the little she did have, she made last and go as far as she could. And if there was another part of Lynn, everyone in Corinne's family and Lynn's immediate circle could agree it was that Lynn shunned technology, to the point that she had a flip phone and no computer, no email, no texting. And she absolutely despised credit cards of any type and paid cash or by check for everything. As their relationship carried on into the latter years, Corinne's kids growing into adults, Corinne and Lynn perhaps didn't see each other as often, but they talked on the phone regularly, and Lynn always told Corinne what was going on in her life. Into the years 2017 and 2018, Lynn begins feeling the effects of being on her feet most of her life, hunched over, cutting hair. Her back hurts. Her shoulders are sore. She doesn't get out much anymore. Corinne continues to call, and Lynn generally talked about feeling better. By now, Anthony Poza is like a son to Lynn. When Anthony starts college in Waukesha, his dorm winds up being close to, as he put it, Auntie Linny. So he made frequent trips over to the condo to visit and check in on Lynn, hang out, and just make sure she was doing okay. Things weren't perfect for Lynn by any means, but up until the past year or so, she was doing okay. Pewaukee police spend a few weeks looking into Lynn's case, and they believe she probably took an accidental overdose, maybe on purpose, of her medications. It happens more today than at any other time. Police understand this. The scene left nothing to suspect anything other than an accident or suicide. One of the deputies assigned to Lynn's case is doing a few follow-up calls and interviews to close the case out so Lynn's estate can move forward. It's now December 19th, 2018, 2 months after Lynn's death. One of the investigators meets with two people who are close to Lynn, both of whom are amazed, shocked, and quite stunned that Lynn is gone. There is just no way Lynn committed suicide, they say, and she was too smart to accidentally take more medication than prescribed. Quote, "I believe that Jessy Kurczewski killed her," one of them says. "I do not believe it was an accidental overdose." The investigator wants more information. You can't just throw around an accusation like that. That's pretty damn bold and brazen. Quote, "They come into her life," the witness says, referring to Jessy and her mother. "They live in her home, they use her things, and then after she dies, they start selling her property and using her Jeep." End quote. That Jeep, the witness adds, which Lynn had purchased after receiving a large amount of money from the death of her mother, was supposed to go to Anthony Posa in the event Lynn died. Lynn had written her desire into her will. Deputies tell both witnesses they will look into it all. Now, I have to ask myself, if I am a detective investigating this case, what is going to be my first response to such a direct and pointed allegation? I definitely am not going to go running toward the caretaker, Jessy Kurczewski, and start shaking her down. I am going to begin to look into the people making the accusation first and find out what their role in Lynn's life was and any possible motivation they might have to accuse someone of murder. Because the person generally ringing the first bell is the one who has the most to hide by the sound of it. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts. I'm doing this show independently now, free from any corporate or big podcasting media company involvement, which allows me to bring you more of the content you want to hear and have asked me for. This is completely our show. Reviews and subscriptions really help. You are my public relations and social media team now, and without your help, I could not do this. And that support, I must tell you, means everything. It's incredibly humbling. And I want to thank each one of you for listening. We can grow the show together, which will allow me to do even bigger things with it. If you go to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com, you can contact me there to suggest cases or just say hello. And look for me across all social media platforms at M. William Phelps. That's the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Let's take our first break here, pay the bills of the show, and come right back. Anthony Posa is 21 years old in 2018. Lynn had decided just before her death to have a will written. She had life insurance and some valuables in her home and wanted to be certain if anything happened to her, Anthony got what she wanted for him. When Lynn would express this to Anthony, he'd say, "I just want you around." He couldn't face the idea of Lynn, whom he loved like a mother, potentially dying. Lynn had received an inheritance from her mother a few years prior to her death. It was sizable, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So when Corinne and her son Anthony heard several months after Lynn's death that Lynn had a tremendous amount of credit card debt when she died, it struck them both as totally out of character. Definitely not anything Lynn would have done. Another big shock to most everyone closest to Lynn, except that is Jessy Kurczewski and her mother, was that Lynn had left her entire estate to Jessy, a young woman who had several convictions on her record for forgery and fraud. In January 2019, one of the detectives working on sorting out what is turning into a potential murder investigation takes a call from the county medical examiner. And this is when everything changes. Toxicology came back on Lynn Hernan, and she had a fatal dose of tetrahydrozoline in her system, is what the ME says. Tetrahydrozoline is actually a medicine found in over-the-counter eye drops. It's fatal if you ingest and swallow it. So, poisonous to drink, safe if used correctly, as intended. But damn, eye drops? The medical examiner further explains that there should be absolutely no tetrahydrozoline in a person's bloodstream, and the amount found in Lynn's blood would be impossible to ingest through the eyes. Quote, I'm concluding that the manner of Lynn Hernan's death is homicide, not suicide or accident, the ME tells the detective. They then discuss one more strange thing about Lynn's death. That Jessy Kurczewski, Lynn's caretaker, has been calling the ME's office incessantly, asking about the toxicology results. There's another bell that's being rung. By March 2019, investigators asked Jessy and her mother to come into the sheriff's department to clear up a few questions they have. They had painted the interview as following up on Lynn's death, and they just needed to button up a few loose ends. Jessy is eager to get the case closed and get her hands on the death certificate so she can sort out Lynn's estate, which is why she has been calling the ME's office so often. Over the first 20 minutes of this interview, Jessy describes Lynn as a woman with several health issues, of which no doctor could figure out, in addition to someone who suffered from obvious psychological disorders. Lynn had gained a lot of weight there at the end because of intense stomach issues, Jessy says, and she turned bitter and aggressive, shunning everyone around her. I've said this before on CTL a few times, and I'll probably keep saying it. Investigators do not go into an interview such as this one without arming themselves with information about their witness or suspect. They had spoken to Jessy's boyfriend, the guy she has been living with for the past year and a half. He says Jessy would go over to Lynn's 1 or 2 times per month when she started caring for her to just, quote, smoke cigarettes. They ask him if Jessy had ever mentioned how sick Lynn had been. He says something interesting, that Jessy told him Lynn had been in a coma for 5 months before she died. He then adds that Jessy had control over Lynn's mail, specifically a post office box Lynn rented. Most people have a tell if you are a seasoned investigator and understand how to pick up on it. You know, some sort of tick. The way they look to the left or right when they say certain things, maybe how they drop one shoulder, maybe how they scratch their face. The detective interviewing Jessy and her mother is a pro, a true professional who understands how to read and respond quickly to people. Speed reading people is a craft that can be honed. Detectives get this. This guy immediately built up a rapport with Jessy by relating to her whenever she mentioned something casually. For example, like Jessy saying how Lynn Hernan began drinking in the morning and all day, none of which was ever proven, by the way. The detective says in response, far as I know, they don't let you drink in the hospital, meaning Lynn must have started drinking heavily when she got out. That comment induced a strange, out-of-context laugh from Jessy, which was something she had been doing throughout the interview. A nervous laugh. Jessy is hiding things behind that laugh. There is no doubt about it. And this detective, he knows it. Jessy and her mother then began hard selling an idea that Lynn was out of her mind, paranoid, on all sorts of pills, not eating, not drinking water, and crumbling away. Okay? So they set this stage up like, here's Lynn at home, overweight, sitting in her chair, taking pills, drinking alcohol, not eating, killing herself, basically. Then they talk about one of Lynn's ex-boyfriends from 20 years ago who had stayed in contact with Lynn and remained friends. They claim this guy was fixated on an expensive bracelet Lynn had bought, that he kept calling saying he wanted it. They then mention how Lynn had actually given the guy a down payment for the house he was living in, and he had not paid her back. I've reviewed hundreds, perhaps thousands of interviews throughout my career. This one was interesting for its remarkable sense of overselling, which is always a red flag. You see, Jessy would hit on a topic, the ex-boyfriend, Lynn's medication, the drinking, and beat it to the ground. It was too much and transparently obvious what she was doing. The detective says he's done for now, but will be in touch soon, noting that they're still awaiting the ME's report, adding, it can take up to a year. But remember, this detective had already spoken to the ME. Jessy then became a bit agitated, though maybe more nervous than anything else, and explained that she needed to know how Lynn died because she had been blaming herself and thought she should have done more to help. So that's her reason for calling incessantly into the ME's office and asking again about it and really fixated on how did Lynn die, the toxicology, that she needs this information so she can sleep at night because she's been blaming herself for Lynn's death. The detective nods and says, he'll look into it. He sees them out. From there, the investigation focuses on that expensive bracelet Lynn had purchased with money she got from her mother's death, the one her ex-boyfriend was allegedly asking Jessy about. Jessy had rung that bell for a reason. Investigators are certain. The question is, why? So they track the bracelet down to a jewelry store outside the area and discover that it was actually Jessy who sold it to the store. Let's take our final break here, come back, wrap it all up. Police spoke to Jessy's boyfriend for a second time, that guy she was living with. They believe now they are looking at a clear-cut case of greed driving Lynn's murder. It's sickening to me that someone designated to care for an ailing woman views the situation as an opportunity to not only take advantage of the woman while she's alive, but then kill her and try to take everything she owns. That, my true crime friends, is a scumbag. No other way to put it. Jessy's boyfriend relates what he thinks is a weird story. In January 2019, Jessy had come home from a concert and told him she believed someone had tried to poison her. She claimed to be dizzy and nauseous. A few days later, she tells him that she went to the doctor and that they tested her blood, and it just so happens that she had been drugged or poisoned with Visine, eye drops. Can you imagine? What a coincidence. That eye drop bell now has been rung twice, police take note of. The poison found in Lynn's system, tetrahydrozoline, and now Jessy saying she was poisoned with Visine. Several of Jessy's friends come forward and talk about how Jessy has been giving money and gifts away, which is entirely out of character for her. Gift cards to spas, Game Boys, laptops. This, mind you, at a time when Jessy had lost her job at a dental practice. So where is all this money coming from? Credit cards, police learn. But not in Jessy's name. The cards are all in Lynn's name. Someone who literally despised credit cards or debt of any type. Remember how I mentioned earlier that Jessy had control over Lynn's post office box? Things are lining up now. By the summer of 2019, Jessy is becoming increasingly anxious and frustrated with police that they have not released a cause of death for Lynn. She keeps calling and asking why the ME is taking so long. She's giving herself away. Ceases to amaze me what killers do and what they think they can get away with. So detectives decide to share with Jessy Lynn's cause of death. For the first time since she started talking to police, Jessy suddenly mentions how Lynn was known for overusing eye drops and bought boxes of eye drops in bulk. Then Jessy begins telling them how Lynn, during those last days, was hell-bent on killing herself, even looking up ideas on the internet. Someone who never used a computer. Well, we think somebody poisoned her, detectives tell Jessy. Jessy responds, I'm not buying what the medical examiner is saying. You know, I actually saw Lynn drinking Visine and mixing it with vodka. Okay. Jessy is arrested and charged with Lynn's murder after a mountain of financial evidence is uncovered showing that Jessy had defrauded banks and stores and loan companies and written bad checks throughout her life. And that when she saw an opportunity with Lynn Hernan, she took it. She wormed her way into Lynn's life, got Lynn to sign over power of attorney, then killed her by putting Visine in her water and other beverages. Lynn had been so ill because she was slowly being poisoned to death by the woman who was supposed to be taking care of her. In 2023, the Eye Drops murder trial, as it is dubbed, we got to nickname everything today, gets underway, and the prosecution does a great job of showing how Jessy systematically took over Lynn's financial life and convinced Lynn to make her executor of her will, power of attorney, then murdered her and staged it all to look like a suicide. In total, Jessy stole $290,000 from Lynn, who had inherited $300,000 from her mother. When Lynn died, she had $80 left in her bank account. Jessy had burned through it all. Jessy Kurczewski, of course, is found guilty. Before her sentencing, Jessy addresses the court, which is her right, though I don't think a 2-hour diatribe she had written out on paper is really what everybody wants to hear, especially the judge. It's all this poor me bullshit. Within it, Jessy hits on a popular theme today among the guilty. And here, let's just listen to a little bit of that.
Believed everything these detectives told them at face value. Why? Because they are cops and they would not lie, they said. Well, they did lie many times about a lot and even on the stand. So let's be clear, it was not just me who lied in this case. People think because they are cops, they tell the truth. Like they can do no wrong. Well, let me guess again, because they do wrong, just like anybody else. You see it every day. These detectives' evaluations and conclusions of this case were reached based upon their own biases, and the bias from the cousin of a former district attorney, where normal conclusions should have been based on an objective analysis of the evidence. I feel their jobs, as well as the others involved, made them vulnerable to official influence. Nobody has a clue what it is like being locked up for something you know you did not do. The more you speak to the detectives, how much they repeat the same question 20 different ways. I was losing my mind as they twisted and turned everything I said. It is crazy. They literally had me start thinking and believing I actually did something wrong when I knew I didn't. And they were so caught up on what they believed that it didn't matter that there was no...
You can hear the condescending tone in her voice, right? It's not just me. It's there. Here's a woman with this dump truck full of evidence dumped in the courtroom for jurors to see. Doesn't want to take any responsibility whatsoever for what she's done. She wants to blame, point the finger at everyone else. Judges don't like that shit. I'll tell you that. The remainder of it all is nothing but Bible verses and quotes and Jessy proclaiming her innocence, blaming everyone from the police to prosecutors to those in Lynn's life, witnesses who had testified during trial. You see, what she doesn't express within all 2 hours of it is any type of remorse or any type of indication that she has been found guilty, which is why, likely, on April 5th, 2024, Jessy Kurczewski is sentenced to life in prison with the chance of parole only after spending a minimum of 30 years behind bars. I love this type of sentence because the judge is saying, look, 30 years minimum. That's it. Then we talk parole. So that's going to do it for this week. Remember, I need your help. Please subscribe to Crossing the Line wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget, leave a review of the show, especially on Apple Podcasts. And log on to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com to contact me and suggest cases or just say hi. And look for me across all social media platforms using the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. Thank you for supporting this show. I am allowed to do it because of you, and that truly means more to me than I can say. As always, be safe Be aware. Sources for this week's episode include State of Wisconsin versus Jessy R. Kurczewski, criminal complaint, trial transcripts and video and audio from the trial. CTL is produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, written and executive produced by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.